Top 25 most dangerous teen girls behind bars, the latest crimes that stunned America. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Today, we expose America's most shocking teen girl offenders, murderers, masterminds, and child killers. Number 1, Morgan Geyser. 12-year-old Peyton Littner thought she was going on a walk with her two best friends. Instead, deep in the woods of Waukesha, Wisconsin, she became the target of a horrific plot fueled by fantasy, fear, and untreated mental illness. Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier, both just 12, had grown obsessed with Slender Man, an internet-born figure of folklore. They believed sacrificing their friend would grant them protection and favor. The plan, whispered for months, took shape on May 31, 2014. That morning, after a sleepover, the girls led Peyton to a secluded trail. Without hesitation, Morgan stabbed her 19 times. 2 wounds nearly ended Peyton's life, one slicing through her liver, another missing a major artery by less than a millimeter. Bleeding and abandoned, Peyton miraculously crawled to a bike path, where a passing cyclist found her. Police captured Morgan and Anissa later that day. Morgan's interviews revealed disturbing details. She claimed she heard Slender Man speak to her and believed he would kill her family if she didn't obey. She described seeing unicorns, hearing voices, and communicating telepathically. Soon after arrest, she was diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia. In 2018, a judge found Morgan not guilty by reason of mental disease. She was committed to Winnebago Mental Health Institute for up to 40 years. Though she later petitioned for release, citing psychiatric progress, a 2025 review delayed her move to a monitored home due to concerns over violent imagery found in her belongings. Peyton survived but not unchanged. Now pursuing a career in medicine, she remains outspoken. "I've healed," she said in a recent interview, "but I'll always carry what happened." Despite her trauma, she has extended empathy to Morgan's family while calling for strict safeguards around Morgan's release. The case sparked national concern about digital myths and juvenile mental illness. Documentaries, legal debates, and mental health reform all followed. But behind the headlines remains a question without easy answers: what happens when a child truly believes fantasy is real? This horrifying case left scars not only on the victim but on a nation reckoning with childhood violence and online horror. From such darkness, what lessons can families take to heart? Monitor online fantasy closely. Internet-born folklore like Slender Man can deeply influence vulnerable minds when left unchecked. Take early psychotic signs seriously. Hearing voices or expressing delusional beliefs must prompt immediate psychiatric evaluation. Don't assume friendships are safe. Even close peers can become dangerous when mental illness and fantasy collide. Even innocent games can spiral into violence when reality slips away. Number 2, Nicole Jackson-Maldonado. On a warm June evening in 2021, chaos broke loose in a quiet Florida neighborhood. Deputies in Volusia County responded to a burglary alarm and encountered a situation no one expected: 2 armed children inside a suburban home. 14-year-old Nicole Jackson-Maldonado and a 12-year-old boy had broken into the house, discovered a cache of firearms, and prepared for confrontation. As deputies surrounded the property, Nicole emerged from the garage with a shotgun and opened fire. She was struck 6 times when deputies returned fire, but miraculously survived. No officers were injured. Authorities later described Nicole as the ringleader and primary shooter, stating she made deliberate choices to engage violently. Nicole was charged as an adult with attempted first-degree murder, armed burglary, and criminal mischief. In January 2023, she accepted a plea deal, 20 years in prison and 40 years of probation, an agreement that spared her a life sentence. Her case sparked immediate debate. Nicole had bounced between foster homes and had been previously held under the Baker Act for psychiatric evaluation. At her sentencing, she appeared confused and detached, asking if she was even a U.S. citizen. Critics of the system argued Nicole's story was one of untreated trauma, not irredeemable criminality. Meanwhile, her accomplice, tried as a juvenile, may be released in just a few years. Advocates like Shauna and Dan Willis, who even offered to adopt Nicole, pointed to this disparity as evidence of deeper systemic neglect. She needed help, not prison, they said. Still, some prosecutors stood firm, arguing her leadership and violent actions justified adult charges. But others questioned whether true justice was ever served. In a remarkable gesture, deputies administered medical aid to Nicole after the shooting. "That's what we do, even when someone shoots at us," said Sheriff Mike Chitwood. Now incarcerated in an adult facility, Nicole faces decades of restricted freedom. Her story lingers as a haunting reminder of what happens when a child in crisis meets a justice system built for adults. It's a case that forces us to look beyond headlines to ask, where did we go wrong? What can we learn from Nicole's tragic case? Treat trauma before it turns violent. Children in crisis often act out pain they don't know how to express. Fix the foster care gaps. Stability and mental health support must go hand in hand. Secure all household weapons. Unlocked firearms can become deadly in unthinkable ways. Justice was served, but at what cost? Nicole's story leaves behind a system more wounded than healed. Number 3. Carly Madison Gregg. In Rankin County, Mississippi, a 14-year-old girl walked calmly into her family home and committed an act that would haunt an entire state. On March 19, 2024, Carly Madison Gregg retrieved a loaded .357 Magnum from her stepfather's closet. She walked into her mother's bedroom and shot 40-year-old Ashlee Smiley 3 times, twice in the face. Then, she used Ashlee's phone to text her stepfather, Heath Smiley, "When will you be home, honey?" When Heath arrived, Carly was waiting. She shot him in the shoulder at point-blank range, but he survived after wrestling the gun away. It was only then that the full horror of Carly's plan began to unfold. Prosecutors revealed that Carly had spent days preparing for the attack. She texted a friend just before the shooting to come see something crazy. After the murder, she posed with her mother's body and showed off the weapon. She told her friend, "Have you ever seen a dead body before?" and added that she still had 3 bullets left. At her September 2024 trial, defense attorneys cited her long-documented mental health history, depression, auditory hallucinations, self-harm, and an eating disorder. Her journal was full of disturbing entries, including one that read, "It's okay to be evil." A psychiatrist testified that Carly suffered a psychotic episode and had been switched off medications just weeks before the shooting. But prosecutors argued Carly knew exactly what she was doing. The calculated text messages, the luring of witnesses, and her post-murder behavior all pointed to premeditation. The jury took only 2 hours to convict her of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and evidence tampering. She was sentenced to life without parole. As she now resides in a juvenile offender facility, many still ask, how did no one see this coming? As the courtroom emptied and the verdict echoed into silence, one truth remained: this wasn't a crime born in a moment, it was one built in plain sight. Carly's case isn't just a tragedy, it's a warning. And it leaves behind 5 hard lessons we can't afford to ignore. Lock up firearms without exception. Carly used a loaded gun stored openly at home. Don't ignore disturbing teen behavior. Her journal and texts revealed clear signs of intent. Mental health care must be consistent. Stopping medication abruptly can escalate risk into tragedy. Not every tragedy is sudden. Some unfold in silence, while we look the other way. So we must act, as soon as possible. Number 4. Sofia Koval. It was a quiet morning in Broward County, Florida until police discovered the unimaginable. 14-year-old Sofia Koval had just beaten her 79-year-old grandmother to death. Sofia, a recent immigrant from Ukraine, lived with her father and grandmother, Yevgenia Koval. On May 23, 2024, police were called to the family's home and found Yevgenia unresponsive, her body bruised and battered. Her body bore signs of a brutal assault: bruises on her face, arms, and legs, and deep abrasions on her neck. Investigators concluded Sofia used a belt and her grandmother's walker as weapons. The Broward State Attorney called it heinous, not an accident or a moment of rage, but something far more troubling. Yet the defense claimed otherwise. They argued that Sofia lashed out in confusion after a phone-related argument. She allegedly told her father, "She was dying anyway. I helped her die," a haunting quote with unclear intent, possibly distorted in translation from Ukrainian. In court, the focus turned to Sofia's past. Her father described emotional instability tied to trauma from the war in Ukraine and her long separation from her mother, who remained overseas. A friend of the family called the act completely out of character. Both prosecution and defense agreed Sofia was mentally unwell. She ultimately entered a no-contest plea. On October 30, 2024, She was sentenced to 36 months in a Florida juvenile facility with mental health services, followed by supervision until age 21. Although charged as an adult, the court acknowledged her age and psychological condition. Her father, visibly shaken, said he hoped this would begin a process of healing. Now she's in a high-risk juvenile program, facing the knowledge that any violation could send her back potentially into adult prison for up to 15 years. Deportation to Ukraine upon her release is also likely. This wasn't just a domestic tragedy. It was a warning signal. A girl broken by war, loss, and silence until violence erupted. From a private hallway to a courtroom spotlight, Sofia's story left a warning we can't ignore. Treat trauma as urgent, not distant. Relocating doesn't erase the psychological scars of war or separation. Watch for behavioral changes post-transition. Major life shifts can trigger hidden emotional crises. Secure household objects. Everyday items like belts or walkers can become weapons in moments of distress. A teenager's pain doesn't excuse murder. But when society ignores the signs, we all share the cost. Number 5. Claire Elise Miller. Claire Miller was just 14 years old when she made a 911 call that stunned a quiet Pennsylvania neighborhood. "I stabbed my sister." On February 22, 2021, Claire used a kitchen knife to kill her 19-year-old sister Helen, who had cerebral palsy and could not speak or move without help. She stabbed Helen in the neck multiple times, then covered her face with a pillow. When officers arrived, they found Claire outside, hands stained red, trying to wash the blood off in the snow. Inside the house, Helen lay lifeless, a knife still embedded in her neck. The nature of the victim, disabled, defenseless, completely reliant on care, made the crime all the more chilling. Prosecutors described it as a deeply disturbing act of violence, noting Helen was attacked in the place she should have felt safest, her own bed. From the start, Claire's mental state was under intense scrutiny. She had been diagnosed with major depressive disorder with psychotic features and was reportedly experiencing hallucinations. Experts said she heard voices, including one that sounded like herself, pushing her to act. A close friend later revealed Claire had often spoken of suicidal and homicidal thoughts, which she'd posted about in online chats. Claire's attorneys petitioned for her case to be moved to juvenile court. But Pennsylvania law requires anyone aged 14 or older charged with criminal homicide to be tried as an adult. The judge upheld the adult charge, citing the deliberate nature of the attack and the risk to society. In 2023, Claire pleaded guilty but mentally ill to third-degree murder. She received a sentence of 12 to 40 years at SCI Muncie, where she now receives psychiatric treatment. The judge acknowledged her illness but ruled it did not legally excuse the conduct. Public reaction intensified after her TikTok account was uncovered, showing lighthearted videos posted just days before the killing. Her final video went viral, leading to mass fascination and outrage. Claire's case blurred the line between sickness and sentencing, raising hard questions about what signs were missed and how a teenage mind reached this point. We can't undo what happened, but we can learn from what was ignored. Act on signs of psychosis early. Hallucinations, dark thoughts, or imaginary voices in teens demand immediate mental health intervention. Take online posts seriously. Disturbing or violent content isn't harmless venting, it can be a cry for help. Secure kitchen tools and sharp objects. In vulnerable households, everyday items can become deadly. Ignoring the warning signs costs a life. Seeing them and acting could save another. Number 6. Tylar Witt. They once styled themselves as a modern-day Romeo and Juliet, but what unfolded was no tragic romance. It was a premeditated murder, orchestrated by a 14-year-old girl and executed with the help of her 19-year-old boyfriend. On June 11, 2009, in the upscale suburb of El Dorado Hills, California, 47-year-old Joanne Witt reported Culver to police for statutory rape. Days later, she was found stabbed more than 20 times in her bedroom, her throat slit, her air conditioning turned onto slow decomposition. A butcher knife from Culver's workplace was the weapon. Tylar had reportedly slipped sedatives into her mother's drink. In their testimonies, both tried shifting blame. Culver said Tylar carried out the stabbing alone. Tylar claimed he entered, then emerged drenched in her mother's blood. DNA evidence told its own story. Male DNA under Joanne's fingernails and on her body supported Culver's version. Tylar's defense pointed to dissociative identity disorder and a history of trauma, claiming she harbored an angel and a demon inside. Culver painted a picture of manipulation. He portrayed Tyler as deceived. Prosecutors, however, saw it differently. They plotted this together, said Deputy District Attorney Lizette Suter. They knew what they were doing, and they carried it out step by step. On June 15, 2011, Culver was convicted of first-degree murder with special circumstances, lying in wait, use of a deadly weapon, and silencing a witness. He received life without parole. Tyler pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for her testimony and was sentenced to 15 to life. In August 2022, after serving over a decade and following mentoring and therapy, she was granted parole and released into a supervised program. The community remained shaken, not merely by the brutality, but by the betrayal. A mother killed by the child she raised. Love, obsession, and coercion intertwined in a violent dance. From this unsettling tragedy emerge vital warnings we must take to heart. Monitor obsessive teen relationships. When love turns extreme, it can override morality and reality. Secure weapons and sedatives. Easy access enables deadly plans to unfold without warning. Don't ignore early trauma signs. Dissociation, mood swings, or dark fantasies in teens need urgent mental health attention. Sometimes the greatest danger comes not from strangers, but from those we love the most. Number 7, Alyssa Bustamante. She was 15. Her victim was 9. But what truly shocked Missouri wasn't the age gap, it was the motive. On October 21, 2009, Alyssa Bustamante lured her neighbor Elizabeth Olton into the woods behind their homes in St. Martin's. The fourth grader never returned. After a frantic 2-day search, police discovered Elizabeth's body in a shallow grave. She had been strangled, stabbed repeatedly in the chest, and had her throat slashed. Prosecutors later revealed Alyssa had dug 2 graves in advance. In her diary, she wrote the murder was amazing and pretty enjoyable. Investigators learned Alyssa had used her younger sister to bring Elizabeth outside. She then led the girl into the woods and attacked without provocation. During interrogation, Alyssa coldly admitted, "I just wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone." Due to the brutality and premeditation, Alyssa was tried as an adult. In 2012, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action to avoid a mandatory life sentence without parole. She was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole, plus 30 years. At trial, her defense revealed she suffered from major depressive disorder and borderline personality disorder. She had previously attempted suicide at age 13 and often posted disturbing content online. Her YouTube profile listed cutting and killing people as hobbies. Her attorneys argued her Prozac prescription may have worsened her violent thoughts. Still, the court deemed the crime too calculated to ignore. Judge John Beadham remarked, "The juvenile system lacks the tools or time for someone like this." In 2024, Alyssa received a parole hearing under Senate Bill 26, but it was denied. A revised law soon blocked future hearings for similar juvenile cases, though it came too late for hers. Now incarcerated at Chillicothe Correctional Center, she must serve 30 additional years before another parole review in 2029. Her diary said the killing made her feel calm and excited. But what it left was a grieving family and a community that would never forget. What Alyssa did left a family shattered, but what we missed before it happened could haunt others too. Here's what we must learn. Don't ignore self-harm or death fascination. Cutting, dark journals, or violent online posts are red flags, not phases. Treat mental illness early and thoroughly. Depression mixed with detachment can mask lethal intentions. Supervise vulnerable teens closely. Emotional numbness, even without direct threats, demands adult intervention. Silence lets danger grow. Early action would save lives. Number 8. Amber Wright. At just 15, Amber Wright orchestrated a nightmare born from teenage heartbreak and simmering revenge. On April 17, 2011, Wright lured her ex-boyfriend, Seth Jackson, to a friend's home under the guise of patching things up. Instead, she and 3 accomplices ambushed him. Seth was beaten severely, shot multiple times, including once in the bathtub after a failed escape, then tortured. His kneecaps were shattered to stuff his body into a sleeping bag, and his teeth were extracted with pliers. The remains were burned in a backyard fire pit and, when charred, dumped in paint buckets before being tossed into a nearby quarry. Neighbors later recalled hearing Wright ask, "Is it time to light the fire?" hours before Seth arrived. Investigators discovered premeditation through text messages outlining the plan. A detective described Wright as the mastermind. Under questioning, she admitted acting as bait and knew precisely what would follow. Wright was first convicted at age 16 in 2012 and sentenced to life without parole. The verdict was overturned on a Miranda rights technicality, but a 2016 retrial resulted in the same guilty finding. Wright once told a documentary crew, "It's not me. What happened doesn't define who I am," yet prosecutors emphasized her cold detachment and lack of remorse. Her defense portrayed her as manipulated by her boyfriend and under the influence of drugs, insisting she wasn't herself on cocaine and marijuana. But jurors saw the messages, planning, and brutal execution as clear premeditation. They convicted her after only 2 hours of deliberation. Now serving life in a Florida prison, Amber Wright's case forces uncomfortable questions. Can brutal violence by a child ever be rehabilitated? Does youth mitigate responsibility, or is accountability paramount? Her story is more than a sensational crime. It's a stark reminder that teenage pain, jealousy, and manipulation can spiral into horrifying tragedy when adults fail to intervene. From this tragedy come 3 essential warnings. Take teen threats seriously. Jealousy and rage after breakups can turn deadly if ignored. Watch for digital plotting. Text messages and group chats may reveal plans long before violence happens. Step in early with toxic dynamics. Controlling or manipulative teen relationships often escalate without adult guidance. When emotional storms go unaddressed and warning signs are ignored, tragedy can follow. Vigilance and early action are our strongest defense. Number 9. Paris Mayo. At only 15, Paris Mayo's life spiraled into tragedy the moment she gave birth alone in her Herefordshire home on March 23, 2019. Barely 2 hours later, her newborn son Stanley's skull had been crushed, his throat filled with cotton wool, and his body left in a black bin bag on the doorstep, discovered by Paris's horrified mother the next morning. At Worcester Crown Court, prosecutors painted a grim picture, injuries comparable to a car crash. Justice Garnham said, "You must have known you were pregnant, and decided you could not allow him to live," pointing out that 2 cotton wool balls were forced deep into Stanley's airway to finish him off. The defense offered a radically different narrative, a frightened, traumatized teen who delivered her baby in secret and collapsed mentally. A barrister described her as vulnerable, pathetic, a frightened child. Experts suggested she suffered a temporary mental disturbance due to emotional shock. Paris revealed her father had been emotionally abusive, telling her she was useless and not his daughter, fueling her panic. The jury was instructed to consider the Infanticide Act, which recognizes disturbed judgment during or after childbirth. Despite this, after more than 8 hours of deliberation, they returned a murder verdict. Paris was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 12 years. Her case triggered heated controversy. Women's advocates and legal scholars argued the Infanticide Act had been misused. Professor Emma Milne warned, "The law is not working," calling for urgent reform and clearer judicial guidance to ensure compassion in tragic, complex cases. Paris Mayo's story underscores a critical failure. A teenage mother in psychological crisis was treated as a cold-blooded killer, not a vulnerable child in need. It demands reflection. Can justice truly align with empathy when distress is misunderstood? This tragedy forces society to reckon with how it treats young mothers grappling with trauma. When desperation is blind but the law is rigid, both the vulnerable and society suffer irreversible harm. Paris Mayo's trial may be over, but the questions it raised demand answers. And the lessons, immediate attention. Support pregnant teens early. Shame, secrecy, or fear can push them into dangerous isolation. Recognize crisis signs after childbirth. Unattended deliveries in minors require urgent mental health responses. Balance justice with compassion. Legal systems must assess trauma, not just actions, when judging teenage offenders. Treating desperation with compassion before punishment could prevent such a tragedy. Number 10. Sienna Pecore. At just 15, Sienna Pecore made a decision that would claim a life and forever alter her own destiny. On October 30th, 2022, in Green Bay, Wisconsin, she took her mother's car without permission, with no license. Moments later, she sped through a 35 miles per hour zone at 123 miles per hour, with 17-year-old Cruz Beltran in the passenger seat. The resulting crash was devastating. Cruz suffered blunt force trauma and died instantly. Rather than stay, Sienna fled with friends in another vehicle, abandoning Cruz's body. Reckless, outrageous, and dangerous, Judge John Zakowski would later say, condemning not just her speed, but her stunning disregard for human life. Prosecutors called it a miracle that no one else was killed. Sienna was charged as an adult. She faced charges including first-degree reckless homicide and hit-and-run causing death. She ultimately pleaded guilty to second-degree reckless homicide and reckless endangerment. At her sentencing in April 2024, the court weighed both the crime and the troubled life behind it, a drug-addicted mother, an incarcerated father, and long periods without guidance. She was left to raise herself, her attorney explained. Judge Zakowski acknowledged her background. She had prior citations for street racing and truancy, but stated firmly, Cruz Beltran died because of your choices. Yet amid the accountability, a moment of grace emerged. Cruz's mother addressed the court, offering forgiveness and urging leniency. Sienna, tearful and remorseful, had earned her high school diploma behind bars and written apology letters. The judge recognized her efforts. This sentence is not just punishment, it's also about hope that she'll be a different person when she walks out. Sienna received 9 years in prison, followed by 6 years of extended supervision. With time served, she could be released by age 24, under supervision until 30. She has been asked to speak publicly to teens about the real consequences of reckless choices. No appeals have been filed. This was not an act of malice, but of recklessness that proved fatal. It left behind a grieving family, a life derailed, and a haunting question: how do we stop teenagers from making decisions with irreversible consequences? Behind every teen tragedy lies a pattern we failed to catch. Sienna's case reveals blind spots we must urgently confront. Lock up car keys and restrict access. Teens without licenses should never have unsupervised control of vehicles. Watch for thrill-seeking behaviors. Street racing or defiance can signal deeper instability. Address neglect early. Lack of parental guidance often fuels high-risk choices with deadly outcomes. A split-second decision ended a life. The next one we save may depend on who's paying attention today. Number 11, Tess Linda Damm. At 15, Tess Damm told her boyfriend she wanted her mother gone. Days later, Linda Damm was dead, stabbed 18 times, stuffed in the trunk of her own car, and left to rot for nearly a month. The murder happened in February 2007 in Lafayette, Colorado. Tess and 17-year-old Brian Grove were frustrated by Linda's control over their relationship. When Grove asked if she truly wanted her mother dead, Tess replied, "Okay, whatever." That casual answer became the catalyst for a premeditated killing. Grove later admitted he attacked Linda in the kitchen, stabbing her once with a switchblade and then repeatedly with a larger kitchen knife. Tess did nothing to stop it. Afterward, they cleaned the crime scene and hid Linda's body in the trunk. For weeks, they tried to get rid of the body, even digging a shallow grave near a cemetery, only to abandon the plan when the ground froze. Meanwhile, Tess told friends her mother was out of town and continued living in the house. Investigators uncovered disturbing signs of planning. Friends testified Tess had talked for days about wanting her mother dead. Text messages and statements showed she helped stage the moment of attack. At trial, prosecutors emphasized her role not as a passive bystander, but as a willing participant who manipulated others into violence. Tess claimed her mother was an alcoholic and emotionally abusive. Police had responded multiple times to the home for issues involving Tess running away, underage drinking, and family conflict. Brian Grove, too, had a troubled background marked by bullying and family instability. Both teens pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Grove received 40 years. Tess was sentenced to 23 years, including time in juvenile custody. In 2019, she was granted parole after serving over a decade. This case wasn't just about teen rebellion, it was about silence, untreated trauma, and a final, irreversible choice. This wasn't just teen defiance, it was a cry unheard until it turned deadly. What must we take seriously next time? Don't dismiss casual talk of harm. Even vague comments like "I want them gone" may mask serious intent. Identify enabling friendships. Peers who support secrecy or revenge can accelerate violent plans. Intervene in toxic home dynamics. Ongoing family conflict needs mediation before it escalates into tragedy. Because if no one steps in, a cry for help can turn into a murder plan. Number 12, trans teen Ash Cooper. At just 16, Ash Cooper ended the life of her best friend, then tried to wipe every trace. On a November day in 2022, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, was shaken by the murder of 12-year-old Morgan Connors. Prosecutors say Cooper shot Morgan once in the throat and chest with a hunting rifle taken from her father's safe. She then attempted to clean the scene using towels and bleach, later abandoning supplies in a panic. In a disturbing Instagram video chat, Cooper confessed, "I killed someone and need help cleaning it up," while flipping her camera to show Morgan's bloodied legs. Investigators recovered that footage, as well as a chilling message from Cooper's phone: "Don't point a firearm at someone unless you intend to kill them." Cooper pleaded guilty to third-degree murder, along with charges of evidence tampering and possessing a weapon during a crime. Despite claims the shooting was accidental, the court found otherwise. At trial in March 2024, Judge Jeffrey Finley ruled that Cooper be tried and sentenced as an adult. Psychiatric reports described her as emotionally unstable and not amenable to juvenile rehabilitation. The court also heard of her previous juvenile adjudication for sexual assault and long history of mental health issues. Her defense cited her gender identity transition and family dysfunction as factors, and therapy was mandated during her incarceration. She received a sentence of 15 to 40 years in prison, followed by 7 years of probation. Her attorney called it a path toward healing, but the absence of a clear motive left many searching for answers. Morgan's grandfather, who raised her, asked the court, "Please remember her life. Something good must come from this." The community echoed his plea. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. What dangers do we overlook in our closest circles? How do friendships turn fatal, and what safeguards can we build for young people navigating trauma? And that leads us to 3 hard lessons we must not ignore. Lock up every firearm. One unsecured rifle turned a teen argument into murder. Take digital confessions seriously. Disturbing chats or videos can be real-time cries for help or proof of harm. Prioritize early intervention. Mental instability, especially in vulnerable youth, requires fast, professional response. When a friendship ends with a gunshot, the warning signs rarely appear all at once, but the failure to connect them can cost everything. Number 13, Shelia Eddy. The night of July 6, 2012 in Star City began like many others for teenagers until jealousy and betrayal turned a friendship into a weapon. 18-year-old Shelia Ray Eddy stood beside her best friend, Rachel Schoaf, as they lured 16-year-old Skylar Neese on a drive fueled by resentment and carried out a murderous plan neither could abandon. That evening, in a remote wooded area near Pennsylvania, the girls executed their plan. Armed with knives, bleach, spare clothes, and a shovel, they forced Skylar out of the car. On a whispered count of 3, they attacked. Witnesses later confirmed Skylar was stabbed more than 50 times. Schoaf stayed silent after being hurt, but Eddy reportedly continued stabbing until there was complete silence. The girls abandoned her body under branches, fleeing the scene as if nothing had happened. In the aftermath, Skylar was presumed to run away. Eddy took on the role of grieving friend, helping post flyers, tweeting appeals, and even comforting Skylar's parents. Beneath this facade lay a shocking truth: the murder had been months in planning. Investigators later revealed that the perpetrators had meticulously prepared, carrying bleach to clean up, shovels to bury the body, spare clothes to change, and stalked Skylar's routines long before the attack. Schoaf eventually broke under guilt. In January 2013, she led authorities to Skylar's remains. Forensic evidence, including blood in Eddy's car, completed the picture. Faced with inevitability, Eddy pled guilty to first-degree murder in January 2014 and received a life sentence with parole eligibility after 15 years. This case shook the nation, not just for its brutality but for the betrayal by someone so close. It sparked Skylar's Law in West Virginia, enabling immediate alerts when a child is missing and believed to be in danger. Skylar's father, Dave Neese, now dedicates himself to his daughter's memory, warning communities about threats that lie close to home. Eddy remains incarcerated at Lakin Correctional Center, with a parole hearing set for 2028. Her sentence and the law that followed serve as a grim reminder: the most dangerous people aren't strangers lurking in shadows, but those within our circles. The chilling lesson of Skylar's story points us toward prevention and awareness. Don't dismiss toxic teen dynamics. Cruelty, exclusion, or jealousy can spiral into real danger. Trust your gut on close friendships. Proximity doesn't mean safety. Talk early about conflict. Teens need safe, nonviolent ways to process betrayal and rage. When trust is weaponized, it's not only a crime, it's a wake-up call. Number 14. Krystina Lynn Adkins. At just 13 years old, Krystina Lynn Adkins murdered the woman who raised her slowly, deliberately, and without immediate remorse. On August 1, 2006, in Lenawee County, Michigan, Krystina poisoned her grandmother, Virginia Bentley, by slipping morphine from her grandfather's prescription into Bentley's medication. Over several days, the dose increased until it became fatal. Prosecutor Jonathan Power called it a cold and calculated crime, describing how Krystina watched her grandmother suffer before delivering the final dose. Raised by Bentley since infancy, Krystina eventually confessed to police and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. At age 16, she was sentenced as an adult. While reports vary slightly, she received either life with the possibility of parole after 20 years or a term of 30 to 45 years. Her earliest possible release is set for 2037. She is currently incarcerated at Huron Valley Women's Complex. During sentencing, Krystina apologized in court, stating, "I not only took someone from you that you loved, but someone I loved." However, her planning undermined the sincerity. Her attorney admitted that Krystina initially intended to kill Bentley outright. Claims that she merely meant to keep her grandmother sick were contradicted by toxicology reports and her own statements. Judge Margaret No rejected defense claims of abuse, characterizing them as common complaints from teenagers in strict households. The judge also noted Krystina's past mental health struggles and early drug use, ordering psychiatric and substance abuse treatment while still emphasizing that the murder warranted adult sentencing. One disturbing detail stood out. Krystina told a probation officer she wasn't sure whether she might kill again. That single comment sealed her fate in the eyes of the court. No appeals have been reported, and no advocacy groups have come forward on her behalf. Her story leaves behind a deeply unsettling legacy of betrayal from within a family and a justice system grappling with what to do when the monster is a child. When harm comes from the one you raised, the shock is total. Krystina's case reminds us of dangers hidden in silence. Secure all prescription drugs. Even meds meant for healing can be weaponized in the wrong hands. Recognize calm manipulation. Not all danger shouts, some plans unfold quietly, step by step. Address mental health early. Teen therapy isn't optional when warning signs appear. When trust turns toxic, only awareness can prevent the next betrayal. Number 15. Sierra Halseth. At just 16, Sierra Halseth planned and executed one of the most chilling parricides in recent American history. On April 9, 2021, Las Vegas police found 45-year-old Daniel Halseth in his garage after a brutal attack. More than 70 stab wounds, his body burned, wrapped in a sleeping bag, and shredded by post-mortem mutilation. Nearby, tools, saws, knives, bleach, gloves, chainsaws were caked in blood. Surveillance footage and store receipts revealed Sierra and her 19-year-old boyfriend, Aaron Guerrero, had prepared the atrocity the day before, purchasing a circular saw, bleach, lighter fluid, gloves, drop cloths, and withdrawing cash from Daniel's account. Their texts discouraged the family from visiting, and chillingly, a video on Sierra's phone caught them joking about the murder. "Welcome back to our YouTube channel. 3 days after murdering somebody," Guerrero quipped, later adding, "It was worth it." Charged as an adult in Nevada, Sierra pleaded guilty on May 25, 2022, to charges including murder with a deadly weapon, conspiracy, arson, armed robbery, and fraud. At her July 14th sentencing, District Judge Tiara Jones reaffirmed Sierra's admissions, noting the prosecution opted against the death penalty. Instead, the plea deal imposed life sentences with parole eligibility after 22 years to be served at Nevada's Department of Corrections. The extreme violence, 70 stab wounds and post-mortem burning, shocked the community and dominated media headlines. Judge Jones emphasized the cold premeditation and concealment, while family testimony captured the depth of betrayal. No mental illness or abuse was documented to explain Sierra's actions. She and Guerrero filmed themselves, appeared remorseless, and offered no appeal or clemency plea. Their acts, deliberate and merciless, forced a reckoning with how adolescent malice can escalate when unchecked. As Sierra remains behind bars until at least her late 30s, her case presses a difficult question: how should society balance harsh accountability with the potential for rehabilitation? When a young person weaponizes familial trust with calculated cruelty, prevention and intervention become as important as punishment. This wasn't impulsive rage, it was premeditated horror. Sierra's case leaves us no room for denial. Lock away dangerous tools. Saws, knives, and chemicals must never be easily accessed by teens. Watch for signs of secret planning. Unusual purchases, withdrawn cash, or isolation can precede violence. Don't normalize dark humor. Joking about violence often masks emotional detachment and dangerous intent. When a teenager weaponizes their rage against a loved one, the warning signs are rarely obvious all at once, but silence and inaction can cost lives. Number 16, Nicole Kasinskas. When Nicole Kasinskas was 16, sitting quietly in a car, she already knew her mother would not come out alive. On August 6, 2003, in Nashua, New Hampshire, Nicole's boyfriend at the time, William Sullivan, walked into Jean Domenico's home. Armed with a baseball bat and knife, he ambushed Jean, assaulting her with the bat before plunging the knife more than 30 times into her. This brutality was not spontaneous. Nicole and Sullivan had spent days planning. They forged alibis, rehearsed how the scene should look like a burglary, and decided Nicole would wait in the car near a 7-Eleven while Sullivan carried out the killing. In September 2005, Nicole turned herself in and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. She testified against Sullivan, who received life without parole, while Nicole was sentenced to 40 years in prison. During her incarceration, she earned a GED and an associate degree, which qualified her for a 5-year reduction in sentence. Nicole's remorse was undeniable. "I've reflected every day on what I did. I'm sorry," she tearfully told the court, pledging to dedicate her life to helping troubled youth in honor of her mother. Her attorneys stressed that she accepted full responsibility, never minimizing her role. Prosecutors did not oppose her bid for early release. On March 24, 2025, at age 37, Nicole appeared before Superior Court Judge Charles Temple. Noting her genuine rehabilitation, educational efforts, and persistent remorse, he granted a rare suspension of her remaining sentence. She was released after serving 22 years, over half her life behind bars. There was never doubt about her guilt. Her own testimony, combined with the premeditated nature of the crime and Sullivan's conviction, made it clear. The severity of the murder shocked the community and garnered national attention. Yet Nicole's transformation while incarcerated challenges how society views juvenile offenders. Nicole Kasinskas walked free as a woman changed by her past and striving for redemption. Her case proved one haunting truth: betrayal is often planned, not sudden. And here's what every family must recognize. Watch for secrecy and detailed planning. Rehearsed alibis or burglary plots signal serious intent. Take resentment seriously. Teen rage can harden into deadly resolve if left unchecked. Open emotional dialogue early. Confession and counseling can divert tragedy before it begins. When betrayal comes from inside, prevention through awareness can protect families. Number 17, Mackenzie Shirilla. At 17, Mackenzie Shirilla chose to turn a car into a weapon. On July 31, 2022, she floored her Toyota Camry to nearly 100 miles per hour before smashing into a brick building in Strongsville, Ohio. Inside were her boyfriend Dominic Russo and his friend Davion Flanagan. Both died instantly. Prosecutors later described them as just cargo in the back seat. Video from nearby surveillance and the car's event recorder confirmed Shirilla never hit the brakes. In August 2023, Judge Nancy Margaret Russo described her act as controlled, methodical, deliberate, intentional, and purposeful, saying she morphed into literal hell on wheels. Evidence in court revealed premeditation. Just days before, she threatened Dominic during an argument, saying she would crash the car with him inside. She chose a warehouse-lined route at 5:30 a.m., scouted ahead of time. The intent was obvious upon seeing that video, prosecutor Michael O'Malley declared. Shirilla faced 12 charges, including 4 counts of murder and aggravated vehicular homicide. All were merged into 2 life sentences to be served concurrently, with parole eligibility after 15 years. Judge Russo emphasized this was not reckless driving. This was murder. Her defense cited youth, immature brain development, THC intoxication, and claimed dissociative memory loss. Shirilla texted her therapist asking for hypnosis to recall the crash. but prosecutors pointed to her post-crash behavior, renewing her license, attending a concert in a wheelchair, pursuing modeling evidence of what they called a shocking lack of remorse. Dominic's father later said he did not want her life ruined too, while Davion's mother stated, "There's no winners here," underscoring the tragedy's scope. Now 19, Shirilla entered prison with her future unclear. Her actions force reflection on painful questions. How should society respond to adolescent malice? What role do mental health, impulsivity, and accountability play when a teenager weaponizes a vehicle? This wasn't a crash, it was a choice. Mackenzie's case redefines what it means to ignore danger signs. Never dismiss violent threats, especially when tied to jealousy or arguments. Words can foreshadow deadly action. Limit unsupervised vehicle access, especially at odd hours or in secluded areas. Act fast on behavioral red flags. Premeditation often hides in secrecy, route planning, or sudden emotional detachment. One decision, one moment, and 2 lives were lost forever. Mackenzie's story is a haunting reminder. Teenage impulses can kill, and ignoring warning signs doesn't just cost time, it can cost lives. Pay attention. Act early. Prevent the next tragedy. Number 18, Chrystul Kizer. In June 2018, a chilling saga unraveled in Kenosha, Wisconsin, forever intertwining the lives of 17-year-old Chrystul Kizer and Randall Voller, a man in his 30s. Kizer, ensnared in a relationship with Voller, endured a harrowing ordeal of sexual assault and trafficking. Voller, her abuser, recorded his exploitation of her and other underage girls for over a year, amassing a grotesque archive of abuse. The turning point came when Kizer, pushed to her breaking point, shot Voller twice in the head. In a frantic act, she set his house ablaze and fled in his BMW. Prosecutors, led by Kenosha District Attorney Michael D. Gravely, branded the act premeditated murder, asserting Kizer aimed to steal Voller's car. Her defense, however, painted a starkly different picture, a desperate act of self-preservation. Evidence of Voller's extensive abuse, including videos of approximately a dozen underage victims, bolstered her claim, transforming the case into a moral and legal labyrinth. The courtroom became a battleground for a groundbreaking defense. Charged with first-degree intentional homicide, Kizer's legal team invoked an affirmative defense, arguing her actions stemmed from her victimization as a sex trafficking survivor. This novel strategy in Wisconsin ignited fierce debate. Yasmin Vafa of Rights for Girls called it a case exposing the heart-wrenching choices exploited youth face. In 2022, the Wisconsin Supreme Court made a landmark ruling, allowing Kizer to present her abuse as a defense, setting a precedent for future cases. Yet, closure came with a compromise. In May 2024, Kizer, then 24, pleaded guilty to second-degree reckless homicide, avoiding a life sentence. "I want to try to move on," she told the Washington Post from jail. On August 19, 2024, she received 11 years in prison and 5 years of supervision. Her case, echoing Centoya Brown Long's, spotlighted systemic failures, particularly for black trafficking victims, and fueled debates on racial justice and victim criminalization. Beyond the courtroom, her story challenges society to examine how it protects or fails those most vulnerable. From this, 3 essential takeaways emerge. Watch for signs of trafficking. Coercion, isolation, sudden behavioral changes, these are often silent cries for help. Understand that some victims commit crimes out of survival, not malice. Laws must evolve to protect, not punish exploited youth, especially those from marginalized communities who are most often ignored. Kizer's story urges us to diversify our perspectives, ensuring justice accounts for the complex realities of exploitation. Number 19, Ashlee Martinson. In Peel, Wisconsin, on March 7, 2015, 17-year-old Ashlee Martinson, just one day past her birthday, unleashed a devastating act of violence. She shot her stepfather, Thomas Tony Ayers, 37, twice with a shotgun, hitting his neck and head. Then, with a knife, she stabbed her mother, Jennifer Ayers, 40, over 30 times. A forensic report counted 52 wounds. In a chilling aftermath, Martinson locked her 3 younger siblings in a room, left food and juice, secured the door with a phone charger, and fled into the night, leaving chaos behind. Police later uncovered a haunting Facebook post from the previous night revealed her desperation. "I want to kill him so fucking bad. Take one of his guns and blow his fucking brains out." Prosecutors seized this as evidence of premeditation, charging her with first-degree intentional homicide. Martinson, however, claimed her initial plan was suicide, not murder, sparked by witnessing Tony assault her mother that morning. Her defense argued she completely lost control under extreme provocation, a reaction fueled by years of unrelenting trauma within the household. Martinson's childhood was a relentless cycle of abuse. At 9, she was reportedly raped by her mother's ex-boyfriend. Tony Ayers, with a criminal history of kidnapping and sexual assault, terrorized the family, beating them regularly and allegedly torturing animals in their presence. Diagnosed with PTSD and depression, Martinson was, her attorneys asserted, incapable of rational decisions due to this ongoing torment. Prosecutors acknowledged the abuse but argued it did not justify the killings, emphasizing the need for legal accountability. In 2016, Martinson accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to 2 counts of second-degree intentional homicide. Judge Michael Bloom sentenced her to 23 years in prison, followed by 17 years of extended supervision, noting, "Society expects restraint, even amidst suffering." Appeals for a reduced sentence in 2017 and 2019 were denied. Now incarcerated at Techita Correctional Institution, her case continues to ignite public debate about whether her actions constituted murder or a desperate bid for survival from a life of torment. This tragedy unveils critical lessons for society. Take all signs of domestic abuse seriously. Fear, control, and physical harm can escalate without warning. Understand that unaddressed trauma can erupt in devastating ways. Survivors may act from desperation, not intent. Ensure mental health services and community intervention are accessible to at-risk teens before violence becomes their only perceived escape. In broken homes, silence can kill. Intervention must come early, or it may come too late. Number 20. Krystina Paolilla. At just 17, Krystina Paolilla walked into a Clear Lake City home in Texas armed with 2 handguns alongside her boyfriend. What followed on July 18, 2003, became one of the most horrific mass murders in the Houston suburbs. That evening, they unleashed over 40 rounds, killing 4 people, Rachel Colorutis and Tiffany Rowell, Krystina's former friends who once helped her through bullying, along with Tiffany's boyfriend, Marcus Priscilla, and his cousin, Adalbert Sanchez. Investigators noted Rachel was shot at least 12 times, including in the groin, and then beaten with a gun as she crawled for a phone, reportedly gasping, "Why?" Police described the scene as a bloody mess. At first, the plan was robbery. Krystina later admitted they expected to find drugs and money. Armed with guns and accompanied by Christopher Snyder, the event spiraled into a massacre, leaving the crime scene drenched in blood. In the days following, Krystina feigned grief, attending funerals, posting condolences, even as police remained unconvinced. It was only after a tip in 2005 that authorities arrested her and Snyder, and she confessed. Krystina's life before the atrocity had been marked by loss and pain. She lost her father at age 2, suffered from alopecia, and endured relentless bullying. In response, she hid behind wigs and glasses until Tiffany and Rachel offered her friendship. Later, she entered a destructive and abusive relationship with Snyder, who introduced drugs into her life. Her mother suspected abuse, and Krystina spiraled into substance dependency as her mental health declined. In 2008, Krystina was convicted of 4 counts of capital murder after a 3-hour jury deliberation. Being 17 at the time spared her the death penalty. Instead, she received life sentences with parole eligibility in 2046. Now serving time at the Krystina Melton Crane Unit, Krystina's case remains a stark emblem. The violence came not from strangers, but from fractures in youth identity, betrayal, and unchecked rage. And from this betrayal born in plain sight, we draw 5 chilling warnings. Address teenage identity struggles early. Bullying, loss, or trauma can drive youth toward dangerous coping mechanisms. Watch for sudden behavioral shifts, especially when a teen forms an intense, isolating relationship. Unresolved anger and betrayal in friendships can turn deadly, encouraging open dialogue and early conflict resolution to prevent escalation. When friendship turns fatal, sometimes the warning signs were there all along. Listening and acting early can save lives. Number 21. Trinity Shockley. At 18, Trinity Shockley was on the brink of unleashing schoolyard horror, a mass shooting she chillingly dubbed Parkland Part 2. Over the course of a year leading up to Valentine's Day 2025, Indiana authorities say Shockley meticulously planned an attack on Mooresville High School. Hidden in Discord channels were messages detailing her intentions to target students and staff. Investigators uncovered an AR-15 rifle, a bulletproof vest, and ammunition hidden in her father's room. Her backpack contained violent threats: kill, bang, I hate you all, die, die, die. On her wall hung photos of infamous shooters: Nicholas Cruz, Dylan Roof, Randy Stair, and she allegedly wore a locket bearing Cruz's photo, even expressing a desire to have his children. Her plan unraveled thanks to a tip to the Sandy Hook Say Something hotline on February 13th, just one day before the proposed attack. Local, state, and federal teams intervened swiftly. Police described the scenario as potentially devastating. Shockley was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and intimidation through terrorism threats. She remains jailed without bond in Morgan County, awaiting psychological evaluations. Her attorneys argue she's mentally competent, raising Fifth Amendment concerns over forced mental exams. Shockley's history reveals deeper layers. She suffered bullying throughout adolescence, endured a serious car accident in 2022 that caused lasting brain injury, and was initially denied mental health care by her father. After turning 18, she finally sought therapy. The death of her mother triggered a mental collapse. Diary entries uncovered self-loathing, suicidal thoughts, and insomnia. The defense claims her online threats were just words and that, in reality, she never accessed the weapons. Prosecutors, however, emphasized the extent of her preparation and violent ideation. As the judge ruled during her bail hearing, she presents a significant risk and is a threat to the safety of the community. Regardless of the trial's outcome, Trinity Shockley's case is a sobering reminder: isolation and untreated trauma can incubate destructive intent. Her thwarted plot stands as a stark warning that pain, when left unaddressed, can translate into violence far beyond desperate words. And from this near catastrophe emerge three essential warnings. Take violent online messages seriously. Threats, even if veiled as fantasy, can signal real intent. Watch for obsession with past shooters, weapon stockpiling, or revenge narratives. These are not phases, they are warning signs. Trauma left untreated festers. Provide consistent mental health care, especially after loss, bullying, or brain injury. When hurt festers in silence, only early connection and response can break the chain. Number 22, Maegan Dakola Grunwald. On a fateful January day in 2014, 17-year-old Maegan Grunwald's life spiraled into chaos, driving a truck as her boyfriend's deadly rampage shattered Utah's quiet roads. On January 30th, in Utah County, Grunwald was behind the wheel when her boyfriend, 27-year-old Jose Angel Garcia Juaregi, opened fire on Sheriff Sergeant Corey Wright, 44, during a routine check on their stalled truck. The shooting killed Wright and critically injured Deputy Gregg Sherwood during a high-speed chase. Prosecutors accused Grunwald of complicity, alleging she slammed the brakes to aid Garcia Juaregi's attacks and later assisted in carjacking another vehicle. In her 2015 trial, Grunwald faced charges of aggravated murder and 10 related felonies. The prosecution painted her as a deliberate accomplice, citing her calm actions, staying with Garcia Juaregi after their truck crashed and helping reload weapons. Drug paraphernalia found in the vehicle and her positive methamphetamine test bolstered their case for voluntary participation. Her defense, however, portrayed her as a terrified teen manipulated by a dangerous older man. They highlighted her impoverished upbringing, learning disabilities, and meth addiction. Her mother's courtroom outburst, "She's innocent," and her attorney's dramatic use of a pellet gun underscored claims of coercion and fear. The jury convicted Grunwald, and Judge Darrell McDade sentenced her to 30 years to life, declaring she contributed to the death of a very good man. In 2020, the Utah Supreme Court overturned the conviction, citing errors in jury instructions. In 2021, Grunwald, now in her mid-20s, accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to manslaughter and assaulting a peace officer. She received consecutive sentences totaling up to 30 years, with parole eligibility in roughly 6 years. Nanette Wright, the slain sergeant's widow, requested leniency, stating she'd be rooting for her to be something better. Now at Utah State Prison, Grunwald's future hinges on the parole board's decision. Her case raises profound questions about young accomplices, abusive influences, and the justice system's struggle to discern coercion from intent. Beyond legal proceedings, Maegan's case confronts us with overlooked truths, lessons we often fail to recognize until it's too late. Early recognized signs of coercion. Teens in controlling or abusive relationships may act out of fear, not free will. Avoid rushing to label young accomplices as villains. Manipulation and trauma can deeply cloud judgment. Invest in early support systems. Youth with unstable homes, learning challenges, or substance abuse histories need guidance before it's too late. Grunwald's story compels us to rethink justice, embracing nuanced perspectives to unravel the complexities of coercion and accountability. Number 23, Natasha Wallen Cornett. On a moonless April night in 1997, Natasha Cornett and her 5 accomplices hijacked Hope and a family at a highway rest stop, unleashing a nightmare in rural Tennessee. They were a ragtag group of disenfranchised teens, drawn to rebellion and darkness. On April 6th, they pulled into a Greenville rest stop in a van and encountered the Lillard family: Vidar, 34, Delphina, 28, Tabitha, 6, and Peter, 2, devout, kind, unsuspecting. Cornett's crew forced them aboard at gunpoint. Hours later, on Payne Hollow Lane, the unthinkable happened. The family was lined up and executed. Vidar was shot 6 times, Delphina 8. Tabitha was killed instantly by a headshot. Miraculously, baby Peter survived but sustained brain damage and blindness in one eye. Although Cornett never fired the fatal shots, that role fell to 14-year-old Jason Bryant. Prosecutors held her accountable as the group's leader, citing her role in planning and executing the ambush. Her fascination with occult symbolism and Satanism, along with clues suggesting she directed events, sealed her fate. Facing death, she pleaded guilty to avoid capital punishment and received a life sentence without parole. Her background reads like a warning sign. Raised by a single, abusive mother, she was beaten, emotionally neglected, and became mentally unstable by adolescence. Diagnosed with bipolar disorder, she never received treatment. Instead, she turned to self-harm, drugs, alcohol, and satanic cults, claiming that the devil himself had taught her. By 13, she believed she was Satan's daughter. Her downward spiral accelerated after a failed teen marriage at 17. During sentencing, she claimed she tried to stop the massacre, and her defense painted her as a damaged girl who never stood a chance. Forensic psychologist Helen Smith later remarked her fate illustrates the tragic consequences of failing youth at every level: family, school, mental health, and justice. The Lillard's murder remains one of Tennessee's darkest crimes, a brutal reminder of what happens when society ignores young people crying out in pain. Cornett remains behind bars at Bledsoe County Correctional Complex. No appeals, no parole, no redemption for victims who lost everything. And now, 3 urgent warnings we must learn. Untreated mental illness in teens, especially with histories of abuse, can spiral into dangerous ideologies and violence. Watch for obsessive interest in the occult, violence, or extreme belief systems. These can be signs of deep psychological distress. Early intervention across family, school, and mental health systems is essential to prevent alienated youth from becoming lethal threats. Every missed signal can cost innocent lives. Early empathy and intervention aren't just helpful, they're life-saving. Number 24, Isabella Guzman. The bathroom door wouldn't open. Blood seeped beneath it. What lay behind would traumatize an entire nation: a mother butchered, and her daughter standing over the body. On August 28, 2013, Isabella's stepfather heard a thud and her mother calling for help. He found Yumi Hoy, 47, lying naked and bleeding in the bathroom, Isabella standing over her with a bloody knife. Autopsy results confirmed 31 wounds to the face and 48 to the neck, 79 in total. In the days leading up to the murder, Isabella's behavior became erratic. She spat in her mother's face, sent a threatening email that read, "You will pay," and her mother even contacted police out of fear. But no one foresaw the horrific attack to come. Initially charged with first-degree murder, Isabella entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. A court psychiatrist diagnosed her with schizophrenia, triggered by psychotic delusions. She believed her mother was an imposter named Cecilia and that killing her would save the world. District Attorney George Brawler supported the plea, stating she did not know right from wrong during the crime. Committed indefinitely to the Colorado Mental Health Institute at Pueblo, Isabella remains hospitalized. In a 2020 interview with CBS 4, she stated, "I wasn't myself when I did that. I'm not mentally ill anymore. I'm not a danger to myself or others. Isabella also disclosed years of emotional and physical abuse, escalated after she left the Jehovah's Witness faith at 14, and alleged a sexual assault by a hospital employee while institutionalized. Her case stands as a chilling example of how untreated psychosis can lead to tragedy and raises challenging questions about the insanity defense. When does mental illness absolve legal responsibility? And can someone driven by such delusions ever be considered safe again? No court ruling can undo what happened in that bathroom. But if we're to prevent another tragedy like this, we must reflect and act on these 5 critical truths. Spot early signs of psychosis. Hallucinations, paranoia, or belief in alternate realities should never be ignored. Early signs of psychosis, paranoia, delusions, or violent outbursts must be addressed immediately with professional help. When teens express threats, especially in writing or speech, they must be taken seriously as potential warnings. Mental health care should be accessible and safeguarded, especially for youth in crisis or those exiting high-control environments like strict religious settings. Balance safety and compassion. Mental illness isn't an excuse for violence, but untreated psychosis must be treated to prevent it. Number 25, Rachel Marie Wade. On an April night in 2009, a jealous heart ignited, transforming a teenage rivalry into deadly violence. In Pinellas County, Florida, 19-year-old Rachel Marie Wade had been entangled in a love triangle with 18-year-old Sarah Rose Ludeman and a young man named Joshua Camacho. The tension, amplified by social media taunts, escalating threats, and emotional obsession, boiled over in the early hours of April 15th. Wade, born February 27, 1990, left a chilling voicemail for Sarah. "I'm guaranteeing you I'm going to murder you, I swear on my life." That same night, after exchanging texts with Joshua, she retrieved a steak knife and made her way to a friend's house where Sarah and Joshua were gathered. Witnesses later heard Wade hiss, "I'm going to stab you and your Mexican boyfriend," before she launched. Inside, Wade drove the blade into Sarah's chest twice, one penetrating her heart. EMTs rushed Sarah to Northside Hospital, but she died at 2:20 a.m. The stabbing horrified the local community, abruptly transforming online drama into a fatal confrontation. In court, forensic evidence and digital messages highlighted how teenage feuds, fueled by social media, can spiral beyond control. Rachel's defense claimed emotional chaos and self-defense, but the jury dismissed it in a matter of hours. In 2010, she was convicted of second-degree murder and handed a 27-year sentence, nearly the statutory maximum. The judge stressed the calculated nature of the attack, no accident. An appeal in 2012 was rejected, reinforcing the severity of her actions. Now serving her term at Lowell Correctional Institution Annex, Rachel is ineligible for the death penalty. She's scheduled for release on March 21, 2032. Though no clemency campaign exists, her attorney J. Hebert warns that digital threats are very powerful and may have sealed her fate. This tragic case reminds us that adolescent emotions, stoked by jealousy, social media, and unchecked obsession, can escalate into irreversible tragedy. When spiteful words become weapons, the line between teenage drama and life-altering consequences vanishes. And now, 3 urgent warnings we must heed. Monitor online threats and voicemails. When teens speak of violence, even in anger, take it seriously and intervene. Address emotional fixation early. Obsessive jealousy can spiral quickly without guidance or healthy outlets. Treat social media conflicts as real. Digital drama often fuels real-life aggression with fatal consequences if left unchecked. When teenage drama turns real, awareness and action can be the difference between tragedy and prevention. From the haunting delusions of Slender Man to the cold calculations of hidden rage, these stories expose the darkest corners of juvenile crime. We've witnessed innocence unravel into violence and lives altered forever. But one question remains: what truly pushes a teenager to kill? Are these rare tragedies or red flags of a society in crisis? The truth is more disturbing than fiction, and we're just getting started. Subscribe now to Crime Ledger USA and turn on the notification bell, not just to stay informed, but to stay ahead of the next story that America won't see coming. Because in the world of true crime, what's most terrifying is what happens next.